Bristol Community College, Mathematics with Dan Avedikian, Math 060, Topics in Developmental Mathematics, Section 2.10, Problem 30. This is Section 2.10, it's Problem 30. We have 6 2/3 plus 5/8 divided by, in parentheses, 1/2 minus 3/8, and the parentheses are raised to the second power. So, any type of problem with parentheses in it, we need to deal with the parentheses first. So let's focus on those. In the parentheses, I have a subtraction, so in order to subtract two fractions, I need to make a common denominator. So, I have 6 2/3, I'll leave that, plus 5/8, I'll leave that, divided by, I'll leave that for a minute. And now, in the parentheses, 1/2 and 3/8. So I need a common denominator. And a good common denominator would be 8. Of course, 8 divides into 8 evenly. 2 also divides into 8 evenly. So now for the numerators, the second fraction, if the denominator got to stay the same, the numerator will also get to stay the same. So it just stays 3/8. But the 1/2, in terms of eighths, would be written 4/8. And again, how did I get that? The denominator was 2. I must have multiplied times 4 to turn the 2 into an 8. 2 times 4 is 8. So the numerator would be multiplied times the same value, in this case 4. 1 times 4 is 4. Now I have a common denominator in the parentheses. Don't forget, the parentheses are raised to the second power. Now I can complete the work in parentheses. So I'll leave the 6 2/3 for another step, plus 5/8 I'll leave for another step, divide by. But now in the parentheses, 4/8 minus 3/8. So keep my common denominator of 8. Combine the numerators, 4 minus 3 is 1. And that's raised to the second power. So I have 1/8 to the second power. Now I have still 3 operations going on. I have an addition, I have a division, and I have an exponent. I still wrote parentheses, but there's no work left to be done in the parentheses. So between addition, division, and exponent, I have to deal with the exponent next. So this will be 6 2/3 for another step, plus 5/8 for another step, divided by, so 1/8 to the second power is 1/8 times 1/8. That's what 1/8 to the second power means. And I can include some parentheses just to make it clear that's what needs to get done before I do anything else. So 6 2/3 again for yet another step, plus 5/8 again for another step, divided by 1/8 times 1/8. So numerator times numerator, 1 times 1 is 1, denominator times denominator, 8 times 8 is 64. So now I'm finally finished with the parentheses that were at the end of the problem. I did the work in parentheses, I did the exponent. Now what I'm left with is an addition and a division. Division has to be done before addition. So once again, the 6 2/3 will get left for one more step, plus 5/8. And now when I divide by a fraction, what I do is I multiply and I invert the fraction. The 64 goes from the denominator up to the numerator. And the 1 that was in the numerator goes down to the denominator. That's how you would invert it. So now I have an addition and a multiplication. I must multiply first. So what happens first, and again, I'll throw in some parentheses to make it clear. I'm multiplying 5/8 times 64 of 1 before I deal with the addition. So this will come down, 6 2/3, and again. Now, I can multiply across the top, across the bottom, and then reduce. But as the numbers are getting fairly large, the 64, it's more in my best interest to cancel first and multiply what's left. So the 8 in the denominator I can reduce. 8 goes into 8 once. It's 64 in the numerator. 8 goes into 64 8 times. Now what I'm left with is I can multiply numerator times numerator. I have 5 times 8, which is 40. And in the denominator is 1 times 1, which is really just 1. So 40 over 1, the problem really boils down to 6 2/3 plus 40. 40 over 1 can just be written as 40. So 6 2/3 plus 40, the 40 doesn't have a fraction with it, so I can just combine the 6 and the 40, the whole numbers, and my final answer will be 46 2/3. That's the answer for problem number 30.